We are back with this week's Sister Scoop, and let's get right into the very first one, which is that there was an accident on the Wonder Man set, which we've talked about, I'm pretty sure, before. We covered that initially. And Disney has finally been like, we're going to pay for that. That's on us.
Yeah, so I think we talked about this in another Sister Scoop, but JC Osorio, he died after falling through a catwalk. It sounds like the wood actually kind of splintered underneath him on the Wonder Man set. So Disney was fined $36,000, and then someone else who was involved was also fined for their part in it as well. So
Yeah.
I don't think this is, surprising. I do think it makes sense, if someone dies on set, dies during the work day, just doing their job from what seems like, alleged negligence, then this kind of seems like the next natural step.
For sure. And I only kind of made a joke just because it's like, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
They were working on a set of one of your shows. Like, clearly there was something that happened. I mean, listen, I'm sure there are other people who are at fault in other ways, 100%. But like, you are the parent company of this project. You should be held accountable for any accident, especially one that results in death. So it shouldn't be news. Personally, I don't think it should be, but it is. And it's something that we should be covering. So that is, I want to say, a positive development, at least for those involved, that somebody is holding themselves accountable to what happened. Obviously, again, when there's a loss of life, there's no really positive outcome to anything of that nature.
Yeah, I guess it's, the best outcome you can hope for in a bad situation is that, these large conglomerates and these large companies are held accountable for, the safety of the workers who really are doing the work to produce the content that makes these companies great and powerful and, part of everyday culture. So it is, in that sense, to your point, nice to kind of see, all right, you are being held accountable. You are being held responsible for something that you should be protecting your employees, and you didn't do that.
Right. Yeah, 100%. But moving on to a little bit of a different topic, one that I'm very, very excited to address, and it's that the Scarlet Witch might be returning. I mean, I just want to say I'm not sure this is too shocking to a lot of people. We've been talking and calling for a solo Scarlet Witch project for about ever. And now that we've been here and she finally took on the mantle and everything, and then they fooled around and like killed her, and everybody was like, really, that's what you did? You finally gave her the Scarlet Witch mantle and you made her a villain, and then you tried to kill her off. So rumors are starting to fly. Obviously, we know Agatha has some involvement with her, but she might be coming back.
Yeah. So I think part of it is that the conversation has renewed around the Vision series. And there's another
Yes.
piece of news that we'll talk about as our third and final segment that is kind of, I think, the reason why the Vision series is kind of getting on everyone's radar again. Because for a while, there really was no news. It was very quiet. So we'll talk about that in a second. But I do think that's the reason why people are starting to speculate about the show a little bit more.
Right.
And so they're thinking, Wanda could be back in the Vision series, which does make sense. I mean, granted, this isn't the same Vision that, she knew and loved, but he is, kind of a blank slate. And I think he has our Vision's memories. So there is some familiarity. He just doesn't have the same, emotions tied to those memories that our Vision did. I was also reading another article of, in preparation, and it kind of ties to what you were saying with Agatha that, Wanda could regain her life in Agatha, doing all of this witchcraft and all the things that are going to happen in that show, which is still, in my mind, still very much TBD. I do not know the mystical realm well enough to be like, yes, I know exactly what's going to happen. Not that I ever really do, but I'm literally shooting so far in the dark, I can't even explain to you.
Yeah.
So I do think it is within the realm of possibility that dealing with witchcraft of that level, that, she could totally be brought back to life and be like, all right, yep, like this is where we bring her in. I think it's also interesting. They're kind of calling it a WandaVision trilogy. So it's like WandaVision, Agatha all along, and then the Vision show. So it would make sense if you're looking at that progression for her to come back potentially in Agatha and then, really be a main player potentially in the Vision show.
Well, and let's not forget the fact that the Scarlet Witch itself is an entity. That's your Nexus being. That is the only one that exists. So while maybe our Wanda, who we saw in 616, is no longer living, there are multiple Wandas. We've seen that. That's been proven to us already. So that's not to say that we can't have another version of her be resurrected or come into 616. Clearly, the multiverse seems to already be falling apart after MOM. So I think it's possible that we could see her come in that way just as easily. I also still don't think, though, dropping a castle on yourself necessarily means you're dead when you're the most powerful witch in the entire universe. Oh, I'm sorry,
Agreed.
multiverse. So I already was like, she's not dead, but that's just because I love her. But to your point, I would see this being a great place for her to come back in. I do think, is it still being called Vision Quest?
I don't know. I couldn't tell if that was just like a working title. I feel like
Okay.
it might go the way of Agatha, where we get like a bunch of titles and then they're like, this is the actual one. I don't know that it necessarily has like an official title yet.
Okay. Well, I'll call it Vision Quest for the sake of knowing that's what it was supposed to be called originally. And I do think Vision Quest would make a lot of sense. I don't think those two stories are necessarily right now able to be told separately. I think they are very important together, both those characters. We've really only seen them together. Let's be real. They both debuted in Age of Ultron, which
Mm-hmm.
we'll get to that in a second. And so I think, their stories aren't done. And especially when you're trying to bring in their children, possibly, I do think there's more to be told there. So I do think that could make a lot of sense. Although, let's just get into the third topic since we're kind of right there. Talking about Age of Ultron, he could be back, which I'm so ready for.
Yes. So Ultron himself, James Spader, is coming back in the Vision show. And so that's super exciting. As you mentioned, Katie, it's kind of like those three all came in at the same film. I think that he is so inextricably tied to both Wanda and Vision in really, creating like I know that Wanda got her powers from the stone and some of it is, innate to her, and we went through all of that in WandaVision. But if you think about her journey, so much of that is shaped by Ultron. And then when you look at Vision, like his actual, coming into being, while it was, hijacked halfway through by the Avengers, and thank God, he was built to be Ultron's body, and ultimately was his doom. So I think that those three are so linked that I love the idea of, if we are considering this the WandaVision trilogy, ending the trilogy with those three together the same way that they started. I think that's it's a good full circle moment and really narratively very sound.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't say it better myself. Also, just wanted to say, I love Age of Ultron. I think that movie does
It's
not
good.
get enough love from the fandom. I mean, maybe it will now because everybody just wants to hate on Phase 4 and 5. So maybe finally Age of Ultron will get the recognition it deserves. I love that movie though. So I think, to your point, narratively, it makes so much sense. Also, it never quite sat right with me that you could destroy Ultron the way that they did just because. I mean, they showed at the beginning of the movie, he infiltrates the internet and like the web. So I think it's really hard for me, even with the ending of that. I understand it was supposed to be like this big, Vision stands with the humans and like he's better than his predecessor kind of idea. And I understand that's where that was going. But I like the idea that it's like, but he wasn't destroyed and he did manage to live. And all these years later, like now he's going to play hopefully a pivotal role in getting Vision either back on track as the Vision we know or sort of know at this point, or, maybe we'll see Vision kind of go off a little bit more into a gray area. I mean, I think, isn't that always an interesting idea when you have a walking AI essentially that might not play always for the good guys? Like, isn't that kind of the whole thing
Yeah.
with Ultron and him?
I think it's super interesting, especially because they took the same set of data, right? Ultron looked at it as humans are the problem, they must be annihilated. And, Vision looked at it as humans are flawed and they will drive themselves to extinction, but they're inherently interesting in that they are flawed and they're like doing their best. And like two
Right.
very different perspectives, again, on the same set of data and historical knowledge. So, to your point with Vision, White Vision, whatever you want to call him, being a bit blank slate, it's giving him the opportunity to reanalyze that data, and he may not come to the same conclusion that our original Vision did.
Well, and clearly our original Vision was driven a lot more by emotion as time went on, but he clearly had that part of him from the get go, while this White Vision, like we've seen, doesn't. There's
Yeah.
nothing there.
Yeah.
So I do think with that kind of standpoint, it'll be very interesting because he's almost like the base layer. Ultron and Vision both had different types of emotions that played into their decisions versus White Vision doesn't have any. So it'll be very interesting. I'm excited that Ultron will be back. Ultron also freaks me out, but also Ultron Vision. I'll just
I know.
leave that where it
I
stands.
know.
That's all I have to say. But that has been this week's Sister Scoop. Make sure you guys are joining us next week as we cover more Marvel news. See ya.